What's up? Welcome back to Nowstalgia. Dave here with a review of The Creator, the new science fiction film from Gareth Edwards, out now in theaters. I love this movie. I thought this movie was so impressive. I'm so happy we have it here. It's so good for so many reasons. There's so many things to applaud about it. So I love The Creator. I'm going to spoil it. I just got to say, this is the type of movie that you ask for all the time. This is an original science fiction film, big blockbuster movie, looks absolutely gorgeous, incredibly compelling set pieces, amazing production design, great acting talent, impeccable direction, so much to get into. It's really everything we asked for from original films. So I was quite blown away with The Creator. There are some faults, which I'll get into, but those faults do not sully my appreciation for the movie. I really loved it. So The Creator is Gareth Edwards' first movie since Rogue One came out back in 2016. And of course, as we know, Rogue One was kind of taken away from Gareth, Tony Gilroy coming in to, quote, save the movie. Since then, of course, Tony Gilroy has gotten his flowers, deservedly so, with Andor coming out last year. The writing bag established for anyone who was doubting. And now Gareth is able to reestablish for anyone who forgot why he's been so celebrated. And that is his sense of scale as a big budget blockbuster filmmaker. With 2014's Godzilla, Rogue One, and now The Creator, Gareth Edwards is on a very short list in terms of what he can achieve at scale on film. It's very impressive. The set pieces are so big. And more than anything with Gareth Edwards, I think what's increasingly perhaps the most impressive thing about The Creator is what went into the production of this movie. This film has a production budget of only $80 million, yet it looks like a movie that costs $300 million. They had a very tactical production that was able to include tons of on-location shooting and very, very little green screen work. So you actually got more of what you traditionally want. And hearing Gareth talk about this is a great Slash Film article going into how this movie got made, where the crew was kept very small and they were able to travel to over 80 on-location locations in lieu of spending, $200,000 every time they have to build a set. So they're able to have so much more variety in the production with this in mind. Also, there were some efficiencies they did with their camera and lighting rigs and things of that nature. Very interesting, but frankly, just to keep it a buck, like, this movie looks absolutely gorgeous. One of the best looking blockbusters we've got in years and years and years. The fact that this only cost $80 million should put a lot of people on notice in Hollywood. There are movies that cost 3 times as much as this and look half as good. Straight up. Ideally, in the perfect world, The Creator, whether you like it or you just appreciate the craft behind it, The Creator should be held up as an example of how Hollywood should move forward. We can move beyond the bloated productions that don't even look that great. We've got a bunch of them this year. And get back to saving on the big movies, yet still making them look good, such as The Creator, and perhaps spending that money on other types of films as well. All that's probably a bit pie in the sky, but hey, I think this is at least a proof of concept of how to go about big budget filmmaking in a different way. So whether you like The Creator or not, I think this aspect of it is completely undeniable, and we can hope that the right lessons are taken from this movie moving forward. So what is The Creator even about? I think for starters, I thought the trailer was incredibly fantastic. 2014 Godzilla also had a great trailer, and frankly, some of the Rogue One trailers were awesome. Some of those Rogue One trailers people hold up as the best versions of Rogue One because there's tons of scenes in there we never saw in the movie, right? Creator, 3 for 3, for the big Gareth movies with trailers. But The Creator is about a future where humanity is at war with artificial intelligence. Incredibly prescient topic given the times we are in with AI. It's obvious, but still effective to me. And, in this war, we have a lot of futuristic technology, but also I think, kind of societally speaking with the story here, AI and those friendly to it have largely migrated to the East, to New Asia, as it's called in the movie, and the anti AI combatants are largely the West, led by America. Who else? And it's just kind of this all-out conflict where the West wants to exterminate AI and AI wants to survive. And the inciting incident that happened before the movie's events begin involved a nuclear bomb being dropped on Los Angeles, the AI blamed for such attack. And now you have, in response to that, this large looming kind of like sub-atmosphere gargantuan ship in the sky called the Nomad, kind of appearing in the skyline like the angel of death, basically. And this gigantic ship is able to basically orbitally bombard select locations and is helping turn the tide in the favor of the humans. And the AI sympathizers are kind of moving around as guerrillas in multiple locations. And that's kind of the state of things. And our lead character, Joshua, is played by John David Washington, someone who was previously undercover with the AI side, got attached to his mark, Maya, played by Gemma Chan, and things go wrong. Joshua loses an arm, and he's basically out of the mix. And he gets recruited by basically two high up U.S. generals, played by Ralph Ineson and Allison Janney. Janney is very effective as a unsavory military leader, and Joshua is basically compelled back into doing some kind of black ops work for the West because perhaps Maya, his erstwhile wife, is still alive. And, he's told that if he helps go after this AI weapon that's rumored to be able to turn the tide back in the favor of the AI side, hopefully he'll be able to find his wife and extract her. And that's kind of the setup here. And what's learned, it's revealed in the trailer, of course, is that this weapon, this AI weapon created by Nimrata, this kind of mystical leader of the AI cause, very intelligent person. They've been hunting him for years. Joshua was previously trying to hunt him down, discover his location, etc. Nimrata has invented this weapon. We learn that this weapon is in fact a young child. Not just any child, though, but a synthesoid child. Of course, in the world of the creator, we have humans, we have AI robots, and then we have synths, somewhere in between, where they're basically AI robotic people with grafted on human characteristics, personalities, faces, etc., somewhere in between. And this young child, played by Madeline Voiles, who I thought was actually really good, and I believe her first acting role, this child is in fact the weapon. And I think where the faults of the creator come into play is that there's a lot of, I think, overt tropes in the storytelling, things you recognize in sci-fi story. One of those, of course, would be this very part, which is that you have the magical child, right? Child as the weapon. You have an adult man with his young female child companion. Like these are beats people know, right? Almost a little young wolf and cub, right? Shout out the Mandalorian. Like these are recognizable story beats, and I think as the story progresses, Joshua's allegiances, as he grows more attached to the child named Alfie, again, where all that progresses is pretty predictable. The portrayal of the West, to me, yes, we've seen it done this way before, but frankly, I thought it was done in a really effective way, where this is a movie that manages to convince you, the viewer, to sympathize with the AI cause, just as AI wants us to survive and continue to exist in harmony with humanity. It's a very positive, optimistic outlook, and the way the movie ends is of a similar vein. But to me, I found that really effective because it's basically grounded in the villainy of the West. And, I think, again, there's some obvious parallels, but if you want me to sympathize with the robots, one way to do it is to just call back obvious homages to the Vietnam War. That's what this movie does. You have, again, Nomad, the big a death ship in the sky. Very reminiscent of course, Western drone strikes in the Middle East, is dropping bombs all over, right? Because this movie was filmed all throughout Asia, a lot of filming done in Thailand, the Vietnam era callbacks in general visually are there. Like you get some Apocalypse Now vibes for sure, but also the fact that of course one side of this conflict are literally guerrillas hiding in the jungle, hiding on riverboats. Like again, like the Platoon Apocalypse Now stuff is really in there. Of course, as is homages to Blade Runner and Akira and things of that nature. Things are familiar, but I was down with the AI cause in this story, and I think when the other side is basically doing the Pillar of Dawn from Gears of War with these ominous blue tracking lasers preceding bombs being dropped from the heavens, like, and of course you're interspersing that with shots of local villagers, whether they're human or AI or synths, whatever it is, right? To me, it was effective. To some people, maybe it's a bit too obvious, a bit too overt, or at least heavy-handed. Frankly, I didn't care. I think a big part of the willingness to let some of the overtness of the storytelling go is because of that production design, because of that like scope of the filmmaking, right? Like production design, frankly, is incredible. The cinematography, it was kind of like a two-handed job here. You have Greg Fraser, of course, one of the legendary DPs at this point, then Oren Sulfur, and they kind of split the work given how this movie was filmed. And man, it just looks like $1 million. I think a big part of that is you're filming in cinematic locations throughout Asia in general, but man, like I think just the approach to filming in locations first and then grafting your visual effects onto it afterwards just make it look so good. The VFX is fantastic. The costume design is great. When they're doing hardcore Blade Runner homage in some of the urban settings, it's hitting. It's working. I just had so much, I think, to give to the movie in terms of like letting certain things go, just because I was so wowed by the production, the spectacle of everything. And again, because it's Gareth Edwards, when you do have your action set pieces, they are big, they are engaging. Of course, they look amazing, as the rest of the movie does. I think there's a really compelling scene where you have these bombs from the Americans, but they're actually they're like ground bombs, basically like huge grenades, and they're actually like little robots. They run towards their target, then they explode. Really compelling visual for sure. I think just in general, everything with Nomad as like a evil scion, this death ship, really effective. We go to places like Nepal later on as we go throughout the locations. Like there's some things that make you feel bad. I think again, some people might say it's overt or heavy-handed, but watching white people accost women and children and villagers over in Asia, again the parallels are pretty clear. I think if there's one criticism that I think is probably a little bit more layered here, would be the phrase techno Orientalism, which is I guess a relatively new thing, where it's a storytelling trope where the future is robotic and the people that are with the robots are always the Asians. It's like I say, a new form of Orientalism in storytelling. I think there's some truth to that in this movie. I think the creator at least is portraying basically every Asian in the movie as a good guy. I think that certainly helps. Early on, I was worried that this might feel a little Orientalist in general, just because all the bad guys, quote unquote, with the AI were Asian, but in fact, it flipped, it was the other way. Ken Watanabe plays a synth. It's not, and I think the character development with this movie, like the characters overall are a bit stocky, but the performances are all great. Like Ken Watanabe, he's just really compelling. He has screen presence. We know this about him, right? Allison Janney, she's doing Patton, but she's really good as an evil Patton. John David Washington, I'm on the record as a fan of his. I loved him in Tenet, especially. I think this is not John David Washington's like best work, but it's a great use of his talents. Man, he is a compelling a leading man to me. He's capable in action for sure. Gemma Chan, I think she's underused for sure as Maya. Perhaps a surprise on the acting side of things, apart from the child performance, would be Sturgill Simpson as Drew. Sturgill Simpson, obviously the country/rock artist who sometimes acts, and in this case, he plays an old friend of Joshua's, a former military contact. Um, the scenes that he has, kind of in the act two of the movie, I think do the most anyway of communicating like some humanity, some nuance to some of the characters. If we had spent some more time with some of that stuff, it probably would have felt more effective overall. In general, the movie is quite fast paced. There's a lot going on with it, but I mean, to me, the movie was such a visual feast and so epic and so large scale that I was letting a lot of that stuff go. I think the ending set piece is probably the least successful of them all, but to me, it was still an effective set piece for sure. And yeah, I mean, I just can't help but like really just appreciate like again the craft and the care put into this movie, and I really hope it marks the start of a new approach with big movies, because again, this is what we want. And even if the creator to some people is just so, or it's too tropey, or it's too favorable to artificial intelligence for the people to get behind, at least the creator exists as an original work, again taking plenty of inspirations, but an original work that looks amazing despite not costing every dollar the studio had. We need to grab onto that and hope that leads us to more in the future. And yeah, I mean, I think in general though, like the world building with this storytelling to me, even if some of the character work might be a bit thin, the world building to me I thought was quite deep, and that was also why I got quite compelled. I mean, there's stuff with the spirituality that the AI characters have, and a lot of this is like passive storytelling you see in the background, or you see in parts of other scenes where that's not the main focus. When we see Alfie early on, Alfie's watching like cartoons, and these cartoons are portraying the Nomad, the big ship. So obviously these are cartoons made in New Asia about the current events. Like I felt there was like a lot of depth to the world building, and probably more to get into if the movie had the time or the interest to maybe slow down a little bit. A lot of fun technology in this as a sci-fi story. A lot of stuff with I think the ability to briefly sync with a recently passed on human and like grab like a faint brief bit of consciousness from the deceased brain and put it into a synth and have a final interaction with that person. That was really compelling when that was done, as Joshua calls it, movie playing God. That was pretty sick. So yeah, that's the creator. I love the movie. I acknowledge the shortcomings it has, but I just think the good far outweighs the bad with this, and we really need to root for more movies like this to come out in the future. And I also think this will do a lot to get Gareth Edwards back into the mix. We're not going to wait another 7 years between Gareth Edwards movies. I'm very confident in that. So shout out the creator. It's one of my favorite movies of the year. It's probably going to make my top 10, in a few months. But let me know, how did you feel about the creator? What was your favorite part about it? Were you able to get over the shortcomings like me? And for more movie reviews, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.